presented by South Country Co-op.
Before we hit the road this week, a little bit of a teaching lesson from Sunrise Semester. And for that lesson, we're going back to the early 1980s, from 1980 to 1982, when all these mostly Canadian comedic legends all worked on one show. They all worked on one show produced in Edmonton called SCTV. These legends were John Candy of Uncle Buck and Planes, Trains and Automobiles, Joe Flaherty of Happy Gilmore and Freaks and Geeks, Eugene Levy of Schitt's Creek and the American Pie films, Andrea Martin from My Big Fat Greek Wedding and Pippin on Broadway, Rick Moranis of Ghostbusters and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, Catherine O'Hara from Home Alone and Beetlejuice, Dave Thomas of Stripes and Grace Under Fire, Robin Duke of Saturday Night Live and Schitt's Creek, Tony Rosato from Night Heat and Saturday Night Live. All of these people, all of them, appeared on SCTV, produced in Edmonton from 1980 through 1982. Martin Short of Only Murders in the Building and the Father of the Bride films joined the cast when the show relocated back to Toronto. He never actually worked in Edmonton. But what a cast, what a show. And SCTV, or Second City Television, was based out of this building in Edmonton, which is still standing to this day. The SCTV building in Edmonton was the home of ITV at the time, and broadcaster Dr. Charles Allard owned the station and Alarcom Studios. He made a deal to save SCTV, which hadn't been produced for its first 2 years in Toronto. And as long as it was produced and filmed in Edmonton, he would pay for it. Today, the SCTV building is the home of our news partners at Global. Yes, this is Global Edmonton. The list of memorable characters created for SCTV is long and in some ways quite endless. There's Johnny LaRue, Guy Caballero, Lola Heatherton, Edith Prickley, Bobby Bittman, so many others. But the two characters that one could argue were the most popular were Bob and Doug McKenzie. Although created originally as filler to both satisfy and mock network Canadian content demands, the two brothers went on to achieve global popularity with a movie, an album, a television special, and many, 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 many television commercials. When the time finally came to immortalize the cast of SCTV somehow, somewhere in Edmonton, the non-profit SCTV Monument Committee was formed, and they reached out to sculptor Richie Veldhuis, who began working on the sculptures in 2017. A decision was made to put the brothers McKenzie near the new Rogers Place Arena, home of the Edmonton Oilers, in what was going to be called the Ice District. The arena had been built, but the buildings surrounding the Ice District had not yet. And then, in the middle of the COVID-19 lockdown, Richie Veldhuis's painted bronze statues of SCTV's Bob and Doug McKenzie arrived without fanfare south of the Rogers Place, and the construction around it continued. And it continued and continued. There were times when I visited Edmonton, I could barely see the statues, but I knew the day would eventually come when it would all be finished. The grocery store, the bank, the restaurant, the other stores, coming soon, all finished and done. And in addition to the bronze statues were two plaques explaining how these two guys came to be on the corner of 103rd Street and 103rd Avenue in Edmonton, thanks to the efforts of Dr. Charles Allard for bringing SCTV to the city all those years ago. I love this statue. It brings back memories of my all-time favorite television show, which was filmed right here in Alberta. It brought all of these huge stars together. Such a great statue, both the front and the back. Congratulations to Richie Veldhuis and everyone involved. SCTV and Bob and Doug McKenzie episodes aren't streaming anywhere right now, but you can find a lot of the work they did on YouTube. And if you think this is the greatest statue in Edmonton, I would have to say this one is tied with this one. The Wayne Gretzky statue, located a little closer to Rogers Place. After all, Bob and Doug never won a Stanley Cup, did they? Coming up next time on the next episode of Traveling with Dan, we're heading to the Galt Museum and Archives in Lethbridge.
Traveling with Dan is presented by South Country Co-op.